sitting out there all the time, woke up and started right out and got going.
Wow. It's the Psalms, right?
Go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right, so one more time. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening, teacher. No. I feel like we're in school, right? All right, Genesis chapter number 25. If you get to Exodus or beyond, you've gone too far. So Genesis chapter number 25. This puts us at the halfway mark in this book tonight. So 25 more weeks, Lord willing, and we should finish up the book of Genesis. How about that? So it's like half a year. So we're still on track for June or July to finish this. We'll jump to another book. So praise the Lord. All right, who remembers where we left off at last week? The subjects of what we left off at, Mary.
Isaac married Rebecca.
Okay. Debbie? Yeah. She's reminding me about her. I got you. All right. Well, let's open in prayer and then we'll get started. Father, thank you for today. Thank you for all the blessings you give me. Thank you, Lord God, for these dear folks here. Lord, we love you. Thank you. And that's all these. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right, I would have remembered prayer somewhere along the line. But thank y'all for reminding me. So we had Isaac. You said Isaac married Rebecca, right? And so that's where we are now. Chapter number 25, verse 1. These first two verses are just going to kind of be strange. After everything that's happened in the book, everything that's happened with Abraham, we see here, is Abraham a young man at this point?
No.
He's what, at least 110, 115 years old, right? Something like that.
Because Isaac is like 37.
Yeah.
So he'd have to be 140 or so.
Yeah,
So he was 120 when he was born. Yeah.
It was how old when Isaac was born?
I believe 120.
I think somewhere around here. So here's how the first verse starts out. Then again, Abraham took a wife, and her name was Keturah. So Abraham, of course, his wife Sarah had died. Remember, he bought the land. He bought the land for the people to be able to bury her there, right? So he has a new wife now. Her name is Keturah.
Bless you.
Yeah. And then here's the part that gets kind of you're like, really, Abraham? And she bare him Zimran and Jokshan and Medan and Midian and Ishbak and Shua. So he fathered 6 more children at that age. I'm like, holy smokes, man.
I wonder if some of them were twins.
Yeah, I don't think it needs they were twins. We're getting ready to get
twins.
Yeah, well, the ones that are identified as twins are the Bible or not everybody that was twins, but the Bible, we are going to talk about some twins coming up. The Bible talks about that, but I would say these are probably not twins. They're probably separate situations. All we can say is that Abraham really liked his wives, and maybe at that age he did not like them so much. I mean, Brother Paul, did you imagine that at your age? I'm just saying.
All that moaning and groaning.
Yeah.
Is that yours or the kids?
And mother-in-laws, forget it.
So number 1, your worksheet, Abraham marries again. Number 2, as if he was not old enough, he has 6 more children. I just was chuckling when I was studying that. Verse 3 through 4. Then Jokshan begat Sheba and Dedan, and the sons of Dedan were Shuram and Letsham. I thought that said lettuce when I first read over it, and Letsham, and Liam, and the sons of Midian, Ephra and Epher, and Hanok and Abdad and Bilbah, and all the children of Keturah. So So now instead of saying they're children of Abraham, is identified as children of his next wife. So he had. So how many children now does Abraham have?
Wow.
No.
Eight.
Eight. You remember who was the son by Hagar?
okay.
Right.
Ishmael, right?
And then he had Isaac.
And the son by Sarah is Isaac, and now we got the six here. And notice all of the and he sent away Ishmael, right? Ishmael left with Hagar. She got out of the house. Isaac is the one that's taken. Okay? Ishmael left.
Now he's got
Now he's got
14 altogether.
no, it still has 8.
Right?
He still has 8 kids. Those
Yeah,
are grandchildren.
Oh, you're talking about the grandkids, that's grandkids.
Yeah, with the grandchildren, yeah. So verse number so
I'm sorry.
it's here number 3. These were the children from another wife, but notice they identified them to the wife, not necessarily Abraham. And Abraham, I love this verse 5. Abraham gave all that he had unto Isaac. So out of all of his children, he gave everything he had to one child, Isaac. And I love when the next verse tells what he gave to the next kid. It's kind of like a thing. Hey, thank you for being my son. You know, I'm gonna do this. But let's see what the next verse says. Verse 6. But unto the sons of the concubines which Abraham had, Abraham gave gifts and sent them away from Isaac his son, while he yet lived eastward unto the east country. So it's almost like Abraham said, Isaac, I'm giving you everything, and the rest of y'all, here's a little gift. Thank you for participating in the family. Hey, you're good to go. You know, go on your way. That's kind of
Here's
what.
your hat. What's your hurry?
Yeah. So hey, I'm giving y'all a gift. Now it's time to leave. So the only one that actually still stays in the household is Isaac, and so he sends them away. Number 4 in your worksheet, Abraham gave all to Isaac, and in number 5. He only gave gifts to the other children and sent them away. So why do you think he sent them away?
Because it was crazy we have all these kids.
Well, to Les's point, when you're that old and having kids, probably the best thing to do is get rid of
Yeah,
them.
right.
The blessing was with Isaac. Yeah.
Do what?
The blessing was with Isaac.
That's true.
And probably just to prevent them from having, envy of him and
Wow.
trying to take his stuff. And,
They're trying to take his stuff, or even trying to kill him.
Right.
Right? Trying to take his life, so they couldn't do that because when you have a father that gives everything to one, not the other, it makes the other children jealous of that one.
Right.
Right? Paul, you had something you had your hand up?
Well, when you read further on, you get up around King David,
Yeah.
on up that way. The guy who becomes the king usually kills off all his brothers.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know, the insight, they're still closer to the leaving the garden, even though they're past the flood.
Right.
The difference in mentality there is different than the mentality now, because now we're further away from the garden.
Right.
So I'm believing that Abraham had insight that he had to separate them to keep the contention from happening that somebody would die.
Right.
I mean, you read Jacob, and it wasn't too far down the road, man. They hated Joseph.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
That's true. He had 11 brothers. They hated him. So, yeah, 11. No, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I'm on that now. Yeah, just talking out there. Yeah, I'm like, man, I almost confused myself there for a second. Praise the Lord. All right, verse number 7. And these are the days equals 20.
Yes.
All right, it always equals 20. So if you have 3 score, that'd be 20 times 3, that'd be 60. And then it says, and 15. So you take the 15, add to the 60. So he was 100, 3 score, and 15. He was 175 years
who's
old.
keeping score, right?
Huh?
Who's keeping
He was
score?
keeping score, that's right. And you look in there and say, man, well, why didn't the Lord just write 175 years old, right? Make it
Because
easier. But this way it makes us think a little bit, right? So, verse number 8, then Abraham gave up the ghost and died in a good old age, an old man and full of years, and was gathered to his people. So now Abraham is dead from this point forward. So we see number 8 on your worksheet, or 6 in your worksheet, verses 7 through 8. Abraham dies at the age of 175 years old. And his sons, now notice it says sons plural, Isaac and Ishmael. So Ishmael comes back again. Remember, Ishmael was to Hagar, but he doesn't say anything about the other 6 kids he just had.
know, Moses wrote Genesis.
Yeah,
So they kept some sort of record so he could write it down,
yeah,
so that they would know exactly how long he lived, right? That's amazing.
yeah, it is. It is. And it had that record preserved.
You're the whole Jewish nation. This is at a threshold. They must have been keeping records all the way up through
Yeah, but I imagine they'd have to.
be able to write. I mean, for him to write it down the way he did,
Yeah,
unless God inspired him some kind of way or gave him a dream, but it doesn't say he gave him a dream.
yeah,
So
true.
only been God spoke because they were moved by the Holy Spirit. I can understand that. But the records, and these records.
Yeah, oh, no doubt. Well, and there had to be some kind of divine inspiration because Moses wrote, one question I always had, Moses wrote Genesis and Deuteronomy. The last 6 verses of Deuteronomy, I wanted to wrote them because Moses died, and the last 6 verses of Deuteronomy, he was already dead. So if he wrote them, how could he write the verses after he died?
You know, people use that to reject the Bible.
Yeah.
I'd have to call that a bone to choke on.
In my case, it probably Joshua finished some verses.
Wouldn't
The
doubt that.
Lord, because he was the successor. Maybe Lord used Joshua. But either way, they're inspired by God. We believe for what it says, so it is what it is, right? Verse number 9. But it's interesting here that it said his sons plural, Isaac and Ishmael, but he only identifies the 2 sons. It was only the 2 and not the new 6. So it's kind of interesting, right? And his sons, Isaac and Ishmael, buried him in the cave. I wonder. Oh, okay, the son. Okay, yeah, sons. Never mind.
Machpelah.
Right. Well, I wonder if the 6 by the last 6 invasion of girls. I think it identifies his son. So anyway, so in his sons, Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah in the field of Ephor, the son of Zohar the Hittite, which is before Mamre, the field which Abraham purchased of the sons of Heth. There was Abraham buried, and Sarah his wife. So remember, after Sarah died, Abraham went to the people, asked him for the land to bury his wife. Like, hey, we'll give it to you. He said, no, I'm going to pay for it. Well, he's buried there, and I notice he's not buried by his current wife. He's buried by his first wife, Sarah. So now we don't know if the current one, Keturah, if she would be one that would be buried with him. But the Bible almost indicates that she's a concubine too. To a point is it says somewhere in there, right?
Children of the concubines. They're verse 6.
Yeah, the sons of the concubines, which Abraham had. So I don't know if she was more of a concubine wife or what, but going by what the Bible says, Keturah should have been the second, or would be actually his wife, as she said. But either way, only his 2 sons from his first marriage and Hagar were the ones that came and got him, and they buried him in the land that he had purchased. So I think it's kind of interesting that the last 6 kids were left out of the whole picture. We don't know why, but that's what the Lord, that's how it is.
The thing is, it talks about they were her sons,
Yeah,
children, and so the lineage was broken. After Isaac was born, he was the promised, and so anything after that was just
Right.
not even
right.
acknowledged.
Right. It's sad to a point because, I mean, at the end of the day, they're still his children. You know what I mean? And so,
He gave them gifts. And so
Huh?
anyway,
yeah, he gave him the leave me alone gift.
Explain to me what it said there. I'll make your seed as the stars of heaven.
Yeah.
There's still a seed.
Yep. Yeah. And we see his seeds getting, now those 6 will have more kids of their own and so on like that. So his seeds will go all over, and some good, some bad.
That's normal.
Yep. So we see here, verse 10. So he was buried next to his wife Sarah. Verse number 7 in your worksheet. 9 and 10. Abraham was buried with Sarah. That was pretty easily. Number 11. And it came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son, singular, Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well, Lahairoi. So now God blessed Isaac because Isaac was of the promised marriage and the promised seed through Abraham and Sarah, right? That was the only son that Abraham and Sarah actually had was Isaac. Because Ishmael was born from the other one, from Hagar, yes.
That's where Isaac was when Rebekah was brought to him. He came forth from the way of the well of Lahairoi, and he dwelt in the south country.
Okay, yeah.
It was the same.
Yeah, so basically Isaac went back home with his wife. After he buried his dad, went back home with his wife, and God blessed him, right? So that God blessed his son Isaac because that's the promised seed all the way through. Number 8 in your worksheet, the Lord's blessing was on Isaac only. Number 12. Now these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. These are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to their generations. So in other words, generation being father, son, grandson, so on, those would be the generations through. Like in my family right now, we have 4 generations. My father, me, my son, and his children. So those would be the 4 generations that it would be talking about, right? So these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar the Egyptian, Sarah's handmaid, bare unto Abraham. And these are the names of the sons of Ishmael by their names according to their generations. The firstborn of Ishmael, Nabojoth, and Kedar, and Abdil, and Mibsam, and Mishma, and Duma, and Mesa. Hadar, and Tema, Jetur, Naphish, and Kedemish. These are the sons of Ishmael, and these are their names by their towns and by their castles, 12 princes according to their nations. So at the end of the day, we see here that Abraham's seed is expanding even through his children. Now there's lots of people coming from the seed of Abraham, right? And so those are the sons of Ishmael. Number 8, verse 17. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years, and he gave up the ghost and died, and was gathered unto his people. Now, how old was Ishmael? 137, right? Because 130 and 7. So it'd be 137 years old. So Ishmael's dead at this point. Right? No more movement. So Abraham, Ishmael, verse 18, and they dealt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest toward Assyria, and died in the presence of all his brethren. So a lot of folks, let's see, I'm confused myself here. Number 18, verse 18, and they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that before Egypt, as thou goest towards Assyria, and he died in the okay, so Ishmael must have died in the presence of all his brethren, of all the people of his land. That's what we're talking about. Number 9 on your worksheet, 12 through 18, Ishmael dies at 137 years old.
So then Isaac must have been quite a bit younger then, because Isaac was a baby when Ishmael was older.
Right, because remember Ishmael started making fun of Sarah and Ishmael's a baby. That's why she sent them out. But I think we had said back then that Ishmael was a lot older. You know, maybe like a teenager or even maybe possibly a young adult at that point. See, one thing that we often neglect is when we read the Bible, a lot of times we think everything happened immediately because that's how it's written immediately. We fail to see sometimes that there's some time gaps that go by and they're just generalizing what's taking place, you know. So and it's nothing that we do on purpose, that's just where our minds go to it. Verse number 19. And these are the generations of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham's son. Abraham begat Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Syrian, of Pandaram, the sister to Laban, the Syrian. So we see here that Isaac was 40 years old when he took Rebekah to be his wife. And Isaac entreated the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. So, one thing consistent that we've seen with Abraham and Isaac now is that both their wives were barren for a little bit of time, because they were not able to have children. Remember that when Abraham the Lord kept saying, "Well, I'm going to open her womb, give you a child." Now, Isaac's experiencing the same thing with his wife, and how did both Isaac and Abraham resolve that problem?
talking to God.
They went to the Lord, right, and asked the Lord to open the wound. They'll ask the Lord to provide that for them. So it says here, Isaac entreated the Lord, which means Isaac called upon the Lord, talked to the Lord for his wife on behalf of her, intercessory prayer, because she was barren, and the Lord was entreated of him, and Rebekah his wife conceived. Number 11 on your worksheet, 20 through 21, Isaac was 40 when he got married, and his wife was barren, so he called upon the Lord. Verse number 22. And the children, now this is talking about Rebekah being conceived, right? So she's pregnant at this point. And the children, notice it says more than it's not child, the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the Lord. So what does that mean, the children struggled together within her?
They're moving around,
Yep.
locking it up.
You know, and if anybody ever tells you life does not begin at conception, right here's a good verse that's contrary to that, because they were in the womb, they were fighting, you know, and of course any ultrasound that's over that, well, you ever do an ultrasound on a child, you can see them and they're moving around, so there's life in there, you know, it's not just a clump of cells that means nothing like some of the world will try to teach us that it does. And this is a good verse to prove that life begins, actually even, you know, God gives life, and He knows us before we're even in the womb, He says, you know. So, but this is a good verse that you can go to say, okay, well, if life doesn't begin until they're born, how do you explain this? How do they fight within themselves, you know? So, verse 22. So Rebekah did not understand why they were fighting within themselves, and maybe not even realize she had twins in her time, you know. Twins might not have been a common thing back then. And then, so she went to inquire of the Lord. Number 12 in your worksheet, she had twins and they were struggling inside of her. She was asking God why. So, verse 23, and the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels. The one people shall be stronger than the other people, and the elder shall serve the younger. So here's what's happening here. You got 2 babies in there, both basically opposite of each other, totally opposite all the way through. And so they're in her struggle in there, and so and what's the Lord mean by you have 2 nations inside you?
Two leaders of different.
Yep, basically 2 fathers of different nations, right? You know, because we know that Jacob later on, as we read, or that his son Jacob becomes Israel, who's basically the father of the Israel nation. Yes, sir.
I don't want to get off the track, but twins and triplets and quadruplets were very common back then.
Okay.
Very common. Because in Genesis chapter 3, and verse 16, he said, you'll bring forth children.
Right.
Not a child,
Right.
not twins, but children. So they're going to have 3+ kids per whack every time they have children.
Okay.
Every time they get pregnant.
All right.
But in this particular case, it specifically mentions that there's 2 nations. God's going to use these people.
Right.
We're at the beginning here,
Right.
you know? And so even with, what was it, Abraham's Hagar, there's another child that he used in another nation for something else.
Right.
He's at the beginning of a story that he's developing.
Right.
What's cool is that in the book of Revelations, when it says, and another book was opened, which is the book of life, this one is the copy of that one, how he inspired others, you know, in the process to develop. I mean, this is the,
No doubt.
you know, but they had children back then.
Yeah.
Triplets, quadruplets wasn't uncommon.
Okay. This is a very good point. So verse 23, it says, the Lord said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, and 2 manners of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other. And notice this, and the elder shall serve the younger. Typically, the elder one, when the father dies, the next oldest child is usually the one that takes over the reign, and the younger ones serve the older ones. But in this particular case, the Lord said it's going to be opposite. Notice he said one son is strong, or one child is stronger than the other one too, right? So they're 2 totally opposite people. So,
So that's an example of what? It wasn't Cain, It was Abel.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
You know, you see that all the way down through there. It wasn't the Old Testament, it was the New Testament.
Yeah,
All the way down through there. Here's another example of it.
yep, good point. Excellent, excellent. Now, number 13, two different nations, the seed of nations totally opposite of the other, and the younger shall serve the older. Verse number 24. And when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. So it says, and behold, twins there were in her womb. Verse 25. And the first came out red all over like a hairy garment. And they called his name Esau. So, how many babies there are actually born? You know, it's very rare to see any born with a ton of hair on, right? Even
Yeah, if they're early, they actually have a lot of
do
hair.
they?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Well, and that was my ignorance on that.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah, if they're born early, they have a lot of hair. They look like a little monkey.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
See?
They do.
They say the only people with red hair is found in Scotland.
Okay.
So lost tribes, they say, migrated to Scotland. So
I got you.
I'm just saying that's what they say.
Eric's a redhead.
Yeah. I was going to say, so maybe we should start calling Eric Esau. So, no. You don't want to associate Esau. You don't want to be associated with Esau. So, you gotta watch when he gets mad because you could be around a bunch of ginger snaps, right? So,
Early warning system.
yeah.
Everything's right here in the physical.
Amen. All right, so verse 25, and the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. So this baby had a ton of red hair. I mean, if his red hair was not like a garment, I mean, it had to be hands, feet, head, everything.
Monkey man.
So, yeah, like a monkey. So, of course, we'll give that person to the evolutionists, right? Here we go. Then verse 26, after that came his brother out, and notice this, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel. And his name was called Jacob, and Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. So as Esau is being born, Jacob reaches up there and grabs a hold of his heel and comes out with him. So they come out as one unit, out of the birth canal as one unit. Now, for Jacob to be able to grab a hold of Esau's heel and do that, that was an intentional movement. That shows that even in the womb, there's consciousness in the womb of the baby.
Conflict.
So if you understand there's consciousness in the womb, then that's totally opposite of what these baby murderers tell you. Well, they don't know nothing about it because they're not alive until after they're born. But right here we see there's life in there. We see there's struggle in there. We see there's consciousness in there, right?
Yes.
So they're just unborn human beings. They're not non-human beings. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it's just what the Word of God tells us. So do what?
They recognize
I said,
their
the
parents.
doctors today just make it sound good so that girls don't feel guilty about getting abortion.
Right, and one thing that these abortion clinics don't do is they don't make the girls do ultrasounds before they get the abortion. They don't want to do the ultrasounds because most people, if you see the ultrasound, you see the baby in their live, it makes you realize, hey, the baby is alive.
Yeah.
Planned Parenthood, I remember, and I wish we were up here in New York for that, but a couple of years ago, 3 or 4 years ago, they did something down in Times Square, down in New York City.
That wasn't Planned Parenthood.
Oh, no, sorry, Focus on the Family did that, sorry. They put a great big movie screen up, and they had a live ultrasound showing on there. I mean, they had 4,000 or 5,000 people show up, but they had 2,000 or 3,000 protesters show up. And the news reports of Focus on the Family said the same thing, that once they showed that live ultrasound, that the protesters, a lot of them dropped their signs and went over to the side of pro-life then, because they all said they did not know that those babies were alive inside the womb. And so, I think if nothing else, our government should pass a law saying that at least an ultrasound is required before any decision's made. At the very minimum, I think that would deter a whole lot. At the end of the day, the reason why there's abortion is because there's sin. Sin of fornication, people having children, not wanting to raise them, they just want to live however they want, no accountability, so that they murder their babies as a result. But But we see here there's consciousness in there because Jacob reached up and grabbed the heel of Esau, and they came out as one unit. So interesting there, right? And how old was Isaac when this happened?
60.
He was 60 years old when she bare him, so he was 6 years old. Yes, ma'am.
Now, is Jacob is he the one that raised Christ? That Jacob?
The one that raised Christ. No, you mean Joseph is what raised Christ.
Joseph.
No. So we're here, and Christ is all the way down here later on in the Bible. So
Oh, okay.
but it's all part of the same bloodline, but it's a few years down the road. So,
Okay.
yeah, no, that's a great question though. But it's Joseph you're thinking about, and Joseph is one of Jacob. We just talked about is one of his sons. Is Joseph.
Oh, okay.
So now we'll enter into the life of Joseph the last 10 or so chapters of the book of Genesis, and the last few chapters are only about Joseph all the way through. So about his life. So number 14, your worksheet, the confirmation of verse 22. In other words, that's what she had twins. Number 15, Esau was hairy and red, and verse 26 or number 16, your worksheet. Notice that Jacob grabbed hold of Esau at birth. Isaac was 60 when the kids were born. So these folks had children at a young age. Of course, Isaac didn't get married until he was 40, right? Maybe so. It took 20 years to have the children. So I'm just saying this is what it is. Verse number 27. And the boys grew, and Esau was a cunning hunter, a man of the field, and Jacob was a plain man dwelling in tents. So, if we had to put in today's terms, Esau was a manly man, Jacob was kind of a girly man. Alright? To a point, he stayed at home, did the housework, all that stuff. I'm just using today's terms. That's no slander on any females or any females, any females. There's no slander on any of that. But so Jacob was more the homebound type, doing the housework, taking care of that. Whereas Esau was the guy that went out, cut the trees, did the hunting, took care of the field. He was a man of the land. So he would be what we call today manly man. Number 17, worksheet. Esau was a hunter, rough and tough. Jacob was a plain man working in the home. Remember, the Lord told Rebekah these two are going to be totally opposite, right? They're going to be totally opposite people. So, verse number 29. And Jacob sod pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. Sod means Jacob made pottage. He made pottage of the fruits and vegetables, whatever it was that he grew, however he made it. But pottage is kind of like a soup. Or I believe it's kind of like a soup style thing. Anyway, he had the food, and Esau coming from all day working out in the field, and Esau was dying of hunger. He was hungry, And we're going to see him we're going to see Esau add a little bit of drama to his hunger here in just a little bit. You ever get to the so point of being hungry? It's like, man, I'm so hungry, I can eat a horse, and then you kind of scramble through your cabinets and your refrigerator trying to find something to eat. And you're not really as dying as you might think you are at that moment, but at that moment you're like, man, I gotta eat or I'm gonna die, I think we've kind of all maybe been there at some point. Guys like me might say it a little bit too often. So we're gonna see here, I don't know why, verse 28, whoops, I skipped over some verses. I did, I skipped over 27 and 28. Sorry, verse 27. The boys grew,
You skipped 28.
28 I skipped over. And Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of the venison, but Rebekah loved Jacob. This is an important verse I skipped over, I didn't mean to. So, it's a dangerous thing for children when parents split the love for their kids.
Yeah.
In other words, when they love this child more than they love this one because they tend to show it. And I think that's very detrimental to a family. Yes, sir.
Sometimes the parents too will try to live their fantasies through their children.
Yeah.
You ever see like the dad who pushes his kids into sports because he wanted to be a sports hero at some point but never made it, so they make the kids do it.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't say that Isaac was any good at hunting or anything like that,
Right.
but he saw that in Esau, so he kind of like went through him, you know.
Yeah. True, and you know, in all honesty, probably Isaac was out working with Esau all the time and teaching him a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas Rebecca would be teaching Jacob all the stuff in the house because he didn't really have any interest in that. But either way, they split their love for him. Yes.
I knew a guy years ago had 12 children. His name was Dave Smith. He worked down at Cargill Salt. He was a rugged man. Had one of his legs cut off at the knee down in the mines, and he was a foreman down there. So the man was he was a dominant man, right? He told me something. He says, I want you to remember this. I go, okay, tell me. He goes, your children are people. You're raising people. And everybody's character is different.
Right.
It's what God put inside of them.
Yep.
And so as far as the way the children went, one with his father, one with his mother, you know, that's the character of the child.
Yeah.
You know, because even though Jacob looked like he was a little mama's boy, he was also a good cook.
Yeah.
You know, he knew how to make his food, and you know, Esau didn't.
Right. True.
He just knew how to kill it.
True. Yeah. He didn't know how to kill it. That's for sure. So we have split father and mother and split children here, right? One's with mom, one's with dad. I look at that with my two dogs I got. I got one dog that him and me are buddies. We go anywhere, everywhere. The other dog I tolerate, all right? The other dog hops up my lap. I pet him. I say, no, I don't even like you, dog. And I'll pet him once in a while, and you know, I throw him a bone once in a while. We play, have fun. But the other one sleeps with me. The other one likes to go places with me. The other one does this. You know, it's one of those things. Just sort of.
Islam, you show no partiality. You show the same to both.
With the children.
Child,
Yeah.
same, no partiality.
Yep. And so my guess is I'm sure there was some partiality here in this situation.
I
Yes.
think too, you have to kind of tailor it to the children's character,
Right.
because some kids, they don't want to do certain things, and so you have to
Right.
figure out what their
Yeah.
bent is and try to teach them, you know, and help them to foster their interests. But they're not like molded like cookie cutters. And cut out.
I know a family that I knew growing up that the mom, there was two boys in the family, and the mom liked one boy, well, always did everything with the one boy, with all the sports games, everything, wouldn't go to the sports games with the other boy. And the father went to both of them most of the time, but would end up going to the one the mom didn't go to because she didn't want to be bothered by it and all that, but she'd go to the one for the other son. And so you know, it creates division in the family. So it really does. And, you know, I do know that family personally, and it's still a little bit of that division. But as they got older, they kind of tend to, you know, overcome that stuff. But it's sad. But either way, there's a split here where Isaac loved Esau, and Rebecca loved Jacob, and notice also Isaac loved it, and he did eat of his venison. So now, according to this verse, I don't know if Isaac loved Esau just because of his venison, or if he loved it. It says here, Isaac loved Esau because he did eat of his venison. So he could have just loved Isaac because he had deer meat there, you know? Who knows? I mean, Brother Paul, Isaac would love you because you got deer meat, you know? So I'm just saying. So back to verse 29. And Jacob sawed pottage, and Esau came from the field, and he was faint. Number 18 on your worksheet. The parents were split on their love for the children. They showed favorites. Number 19, Jacob made pottage, and Esau was hungry. Verse 30, and Esau said to Jacob, feed me, I pray thee, with that same red pottage, for I am faint, therefore was his name called Edom. So here's what Esau said. Esau telling Jacob, look, man, I'm hungry, I'm going to die, I'm fainting here, man. Give me some of your pottage. Notice it said red pottage.
Red.
And what color was Esau?
Red.
So, you know, it's just kind of interesting how that worked, right? Yes, sir.
I seen an advertisement for like Christian identity movement, and what they believe is a certain race of people are the lost tribes of Israel. But it showed Esau's descendants, and Karl Marx was one of them because of red.
Oh, I got you. Hey, Eric, you don't know anybody named Esau, do you? Just saying. If you didn't know anybody named Esau, you probably want to say, hey, I can't talk to you no more. Praise the Lord. So number 20 in your worksheet, Esau was hungry and wanted the pottage that Jacob had. So So notice Esau said, I am faint, therefore was his name called Edom. So in other words, he's hungry, but he's adding some drama to it. And so I'm going to do, oh man, I'm really hungry, give me something to eat, you know? And, huh?
He goes on to say he's gonna die.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see in 2 verses now. He says, I'm going to die. So now Jacob, because here's the thing, Jacob is known as a deceiver, okay? And we're going to see some deception here take place, intentional deception. But, so who was Jacob's father? Isaac, right? But who was Jacob's grandfather? Abraham. Didn't Abraham deceive people?
Yeah.
A couple of times, right? And Sarah deceived, no, there's some other ones in the family that deceived, can't remember exactly who it was in here, but we saw some other deception there where it was kind of in the family line. There was some deception that was kind of the example set. So Jacob takes up on that in verse 31, and Jacob said, sell me this day thy birthright. So Esau was hungry. Jacob had what Esau wanted, and Esau's like, or Jacob's like, I'll give it to you. I don't want you to sell me your birthright in the process of it. The birth, remember God said the younger or the older shall serve the younger?
Yes.
Well, the birthright meant that was one that got the next, the guy everything the father had, the next in line. And so Jacob now, and see, this should have been a red flag for Esau. But it shows us that when our bodies are in physical, what we think desperation, we tend to forget the promises of God and the things of God, and we tend to try to satisfy our fleshly needs at the moment. Yes, sir.
I think it's almost like an analogy of the war between the spirit and the flesh.
Yeah.
And Esau was fleshly, even to the appetites of the flesh, where Jacob seeing spirit something,
Yes.
spiritual blessing, the blessing was more of a spiritual thing.
He was more important to him than the food.
Plus, there's another option to consider here, too, is maybe Jacob didn't like the fact that his father favored Esau more, and maybe Jacob thought, well, if I get the birthright, maybe Dad will like me now, too. You know, there could always been those thoughts going in the mind that a lot of us would have as well. We don't know exactly the mind thought, but either way, Jacob saw an opportunity, he took it. He's like, sell me the birthright, and I'll give you the pottage.
Esau's thought on that matter was that I'm going to get my birthright regardless. That's what he was thinking.
Yeah.
I'm going to get the food and I'm going to still get my birthright.
Right.
But he sold it because he didn't think much about it.
Yep.
And God's looking down from heaven and the devil's looking down over his shoulder and he's going, well, what are you going to do about this? And he's talking to God.
Yeah.
And the Lord said, I'll get it worked out.
Absolutely. We're going to see that in the next verse or so. Number 21 on your worksheet, verse 31. Jacob uses as an opportunity to deceive his brother. I'm sure he did not like the fact that Esau was the favorite. I'm sure that bothered him as well growing up. I mean, every boy growing up wants a dad. They want to have a dad they can cling to, dad they can do things with, and it's by natural design, So, verse 32, and Esau said, here's the drama again, behold, I am at the point to die. And what profit shall this birthright do to me? In other words, I'm going to die and it's just a birthright. Well, what difference does it make? All right. So he didn't really care about the birthright because he was interested in satisfying his flesh. He wanted to eat because he was going to die from the food. When we all know, if you're a hunter out there, obviously he knew how to make venison, right? Obviously he knew how to make something to eat because his father liked venison. So I'm sure if Esau had tried hard enough, he could have killed some kind of an animal, cooked it up somewhere, and ate something from it. You know what I mean? So he would just throw it on him. But he could have done something. But he wanted this watch because it was right there. So it's like me walking to a mall and you walk to one of the pizza shops and got the big sliced pizza. All of a sudden, man, you gotta have it. I'm starving. I'm gonna die if I don't go give you a piece of pizza. Do you know it? And so it's kind of that same analogy there. So number 22 on your worksheet. Verse 32, Esau was so dramatic and thought he was going to die and lost all honor and blessings from his birthright. He didn't really care much about his birthright at the moment. What profit shall his birthright do to me? Verse 33, and Jacob said, swear me this day, and he sware unto him, and he sold his birthright unto Jacob. So, in other words, they made a covenant between them two, so they get the birthright. I think Jacob was looking at that covenant as a way of saying, I'm going to get everything Dad's got. Esau was looking at it as a way of saying, look, I'll promise you that, but I'm going to get it anyway. because I'm the oldest, is what Brother Paul said. But we will see that there's going to be a whole lot more deception take place as time gets older. Isn't it interesting that God uses seems like the worst, in our terms, the worst sinners that are out there, the most, or the people that we would reject to do things for God, God seems to change our hearts and use them? Yes, sir.
They always say, well, man wrote the Bible. No, God wrote it, because if man wrote it, he'd leave out a lot of stuff.
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. If man wrote the Bible, man would not be as evil
He would
as man is.
he present himself in a better
You know,
light.
Yeah. If man wrote the Bible, the heart wouldn't be, the heart is
Deceitful above all
deceitful above all things. It would be the heart frowns on things, you know, and is sometimes bad above all things. If man wrote the Bible, that's what would say something like that. Actually, I think some of the new versions watered down, right?
Yeah.
Because they're all handwritten, not God written. Yes, sir.
You can see that with all the superheroes that are on TV. Man's going to save the day.
Yeah.
And that don't say that in this book.
My superhero is Jerry Mouse. I'm Tom and Jerry. I love Jerry. You know, and
Smart mouse.
he was a very smart mouse. Always had a way to build things to deceive the cat. You know, he's my superhero. But come on, guys, we're in church. We class. We have fun. Praise the Lord. So number 23 on your worksheet. Esau sells his birthright for a bowl of pottage. Oh, how we sell things for God for our selfishness. Oh man, I put a small G on that. I can't believe I didn't catch it. I hate that. Oh, how we sell the things of God for our selfishness. You know, even Christianity, we tend to sacrifice the thing God's given us or promises that God made to satisfy our flesh.
Yeah.
And sometimes we do it and we don't even have to think about it. We just automatically, like going to church, leading people or whatever. Yeah, I'm not worried about that, but I'm going to take care of this right now, you know. And so sometimes we sacrifice the things of God for the things of the world, when it should actually be the other way around. We should sacrifice things of the world for the things of the Lord. Yes, ma'am.
Steve was just talking about a quote. It says, "Never sacrifice the permanent on the altar of the temporary."
Mm-hmm.
Because that's, you know.
Yep. Absolutely. Our last verse for the evening, we'll keep this up. So Jacob buys your birthright from Esau. Esau really doesn't care much about his birthright. Verse 34, then Jacob gave Esau bread and pottage of lentils, and he did eat and drink, and rose up and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Now, I looked up that word despise, and dictionaries is simply defined as to look down on with disrespect, to regard as worthless. So it said Esau despised his birthright. He didn't hate his birthright. He just disrespected it. He didn't have any honor in it. He had no regards for it. He thought of it as worthless because see, the father still had to bless the son, right? Had to give the son the blessing of the birthright. And see, the father didn't know at this point the birthright was sold. So yes.
It's kind of what the world views Christians, the church as, is unimportant. Like when they were shutting down businesses, the churches were
Non-essential.
non-essential.
Yeah.
And so they were viewing us with disrespect. And
Yeah.
worthless, you know? Whereas a liquor store, well, that was essential.
Right. And Walmart was essential, right? All that stuff. So, yep. So we're going to end there for tonight, and then next week we'll pick up 26. So it looks like we don't continue with the birthright for a minute. We jump on a couple other things, and then we get back to it. But so far, halfway through the book of Genesis, we've covered a lot of stuff. There has been so much. There's been deception. There's been lies. There's been curse. There's been sin. There's been all this stuff just in the first 25 chapters. Can you only imagine, see where the next 25 is going? We get to a point here where it starts having a continual story, chapter after chapter after chapter. So right now we're at Esau sold his birthright to Jacob. That's where we're going to pick up at next week and go from there. So, all right. With that being said, tomorrow is Thanksgiving Day. I personally, on behalf of life, and I want to wish everybody happy. Oh, you folks online will